All right, 10:45 just popped up on the computer, so away we go. Thank you all for making the trek down to the end of this hall, if nothing else, because it is quite the accomplishment to find this room and get here. My name's Joy Hawkins. I practice at the University of Colorado, and I'll be moderating this session. And I was lucky enough to recruit 3 incredible speakers to talk about quality improvement, how you get it, how you use it, what you do with it, from the whole spectrum. So let me introduce our speakers first, and then we'll take turns going through and see if we have some time for questions at the end. Let me see if I can get this to find the arrow. There we go, arrow. So our first speaker is going to be Jed Wolpaw. He works at Johns Hopkins, where he's associate professor and vice chair for education. He is also their residency program director, and on a national level, he's the president of the Association of Anesthesiology Core Program Directors. So Jed heads all the residency directors in the whole country and really has his finger on that pulse. He practices critical care medicine, and he's the founder and host of the ACRAC podcast, which if you have not sampled that, please do. It is really just amazing, and as you can see, has over 6 million total downloads. Very, very popular. And in 2021, he was the winner of the ASA Excellence in Anesthesia Education Award. So very qualified to talk about how residency programs are using and training residents to do quality improvement. Our second speaker will be Rick Dutton, who I don't know how you narrow down what Rick does, because he has like 15,000 jobs as best I can tell, but I'm highlighting just a few here. He is the Chief Quality Officer for USAP, which means he's collecting data on practices all over the United States and then funneling that information back to the practices so they can use it for their own quality improvement. He spent 17 years as the Director of Trauma Anesthesia for the Maryland Shock Trauma Center and established NACOR and AIRS, so the ASA level quality improvement areas. He's currently the chair at Capital Region Medical Center, and he's also an adjunct professor at University of Maryland. So he's going to give us kind of the national anesthesia practice way to do quality improvement. And then finally, Sheila Barnett, who's professor and chair at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. She was formerly the director of community anesthesia quality and the chief medical officer at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. She's also the prior chair of the ASA's Committee on Performance and Outcome Measures, and CPOM has a massive responsibility for helping choose what outcome measures we will all be measured on in our practices for CMS and other bodies like that. Currently, she's a board member of the Anesthesia Quality Institute, as is Rick Dutton, by the way, and she'll be talking about, for an academic chair, how you would use that in a practice and get your quality improvement data. So with that, I am going to pass along to Jed and let him start his presentation. Yay.
Thanks, Rick. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Jed Wolpaw. Pleasure to be here. How many people in the audience are program directors? Do we have any PDs? Okay. How about residents? Couple? Okay. So you all know this really, really well, but I'm going to try to give an idea of what we think about on the ground in residencies, both from a program director perspective and resident perspective, and then share some data with you that we did a survey of program directors across the country to try to get a feel for what people are doing and what they would like to see done better or what resources they would like to have. Am I doing something wrong here, Joy? What do I push?
You have to click on the screen once first.
Okay.
Click on the...
Oh, that worked. Okay. All right. I have no disclosures. So let's talk about the requirements. So those of you who are involved in residency leadership or who are residents know this, but the ACGME governs the residency requirements in this country, and this is what they require. First, residents have to have education on and actively participate in quality improvement and patient safety. All right, this is really broad, right? This can be interpreted in many ways, and we'll talk about some of the ways in which it is interpreted. Residents have to have the opportunity to analyze their clinical practice. This is probably the one that is most difficult for us as program directors to figure out how to help residents do. There are now some ways, actually, for the first time really ever in my experience, and I'm 10 years into being a program director, that this is now able to be done. But traditionally, this is just so hard. How do we help residents in anesthesiology to understand what their outcomes are and then how to make improvements? Really hard. And then, again, to not only analyze the data, but to identify areas for improvement. And then to participate in patient safety reporting and analysis. Again, very broad. When you use the term participate, what does that mean? The ACGME does not give guidance on this. I'm not part of the review committee. I would guess that probably some of this is intentional to give some leeway to programs to kind of figure out how to do this, but that does leave us programs with a lot of figuring out of exactly how to approach this. So I want to just give you some examples of ways in which I think one of the problems is, and I bet the residents in the audience would agree, that often quality improvement in residency is kind of seen as this just box to be checked. You know, you have to do it. It's required by the ACGME. People think of it as kind of boring. You know, we just have to, I have to get it done. I have to fill out the sheet, check that I did it, turn something into somebody, and then I'm done. Okay, now I can graduate. And I think that's a real disservice, as I'm sure you all agree if you're here, to the specialty, to the focus of quality and safety, and to what it could be. And so just some examples of some really great opportunities, some great projects that folks at our place have done that really go much beyond just a, you know, okay, I'm going to put some snacks in a box and then survey the residents before to see are they happy and after to see if they're happy, and now I show they're happier because they have snacks, right? I mean, that would in theory be a QI project, but these are some maybe more rewarding projects that some of our residents have done. So recycling in the ORs. This is a combination of medical students and residents who really went through a variety of processes, talking to the stakeholders, talking to the people who controlled all of the various powers in the OR, and were able to get some recycling bins in the OR, collect all of the disposable material that can be recycled, have a team of people to go through it, and then you get that stuff cleaned and sent out to places that can use it. Desflurane, we got out of our ORs. This was, I'm sure some have seen nods, some of you have done the same, but this was a great example. We had residents on board working with some of our faculty, and this was not just take the desflurane out, right? I mean, you'd have a riot. So this was engaging with the stakeholders, figuring out why people were attached to the desflurane, figuring out some education around what could we do instead, figuring out when it was the right time to take it out, and assessing the effect on a variety of things, including the environment. So this was done over a period of an extensive amount of time and done really well and was very successful. So these are some examples of some quality projects residents got involved in, and they really felt good about the participation and the outcome. And I would argue, while they took more time and effort than the snack box, they were much more rewarding for the trainees involved. All right, the OSCE, so those of you of a certain age, and I include myself in this, did not have an OSCE as part of your board certification, but the current residents absolutely do. And so just to make sure we're all on the same page, it used to be, some of you I'm sure went to the hotel, right? You did your oral boards in the hotel, and that was just oral boards. That's what it was called, and that's what it was. And then it moved to a center, but was still just oral boards. And now the applied exam consists of two different things. One is what we used to call oral boards, which is now called the structured oral exam, and the other is the OSCE. And the OSCE is a series of 7 stations, and the residents go from station to station, and they do tasks at each station and get evaluated. And one of those stations is quality improvement, okay? And so I'm gonna share with you this scenario and task that we use in our mock OSCE to help prepare our residents. So I'm gonna read it to you because I know you're reading it anyway. The hospital leadership is concerned about the number of reports submitted for medication errors in the PACU. One of your nurse colleagues has been tasked to design and implement a patient safety project to reduce medication errors and ask for your help. Your task is to talk to your colleague about the general steps of designing and implementing a QI project. The discussion should focus on your general approach to a project for improving patient safety. All right, so the residents would read this outside the room, and then they go in and they have about 7 minutes to have a discussion with the nurse. And these are the kind of things they're being evaluated on. Are they friendly, collegial, professional? I bet if you asked a lot of residents, they would say this isn't QI, but it is, right? This is actually an aspect of QI, being able to interact with people. The people skills is absolutely a part of it. And I don't think many residents understand that, or programs that do QI with residents talk about this or focus on these skills, but this is part of it. Obviously, they need to learn how to and then be able to demonstrate that they can help someone use the language around getting baseline info, a needs assessment, look for benchmarks that they're going to define. Stakeholders, who are they? How are they going to engage with them? Do they have this conversation with the nurse? So again, it's not enough to go in and just say, let's talk about a project. What do you want to do? Even if you kind of come up with a good project, right? They're being evaluated on, do they know the language of quality and safety? Do they devise a change in practice? Do they go over methods for educating and training, establish and implement a plan of action, and a way to measure the outcome? So these are the main ways in which they're being evaluated. So when we think about how can we help residency programs with quality and safety for their residents, we need to keep in mind that there's two main kind of categories we have to keep in mind. One is that they are going to be evaluated and cannot be board certified without being able to do that. But the other, of course, and I would hope they overlap, is that if we can do this in a way that really excites them, then we are training the next generation of people who are going to participate in what we'll hear, I think, next about department-wide and nationwide quality projects. And if we don't, then I think what we end up with, and I think this is what we have been doing for a long time, is we end up with trainees who think, oh, I checked it off, I don't ever want to do that again, right? And that's a problem. So I said we surveyed PDs, and those of you who are PDs may have seen this, or you may have seen it and deleted it, it's okay. It's always hard to get people to do surveys, so the response rate wasn't fabulous. We had about 15% of the 170 so PDs in the country fill this out. But as Joy said, in my role as president of the AACPD, I talk to program directors all the time. So I can tell you that even though we only have about 7 or so PDs who responded to this, these answers do jive with what I hear from PDs. So the first question was, how do your trainees meet the ACGME requirement? So a lot of and you could answer more than one, but didactics are a very common one. And this means, for example, you might have a series of online lectures that the residents do. And in theory, that could be it. I told you that requirement is really broad. So it could be that's it. They do the online modules, and that's it. They're done with their QI requirement. They haven't participated in a project. They haven't engaged much in real world anything, but they did this. Does this give them the language for the OSCE? Yeah, it probably does. But does it excite them? No. Does it get them figuring out how to interact with other people around in a project to make change? No. So it does work, and that is what a lot of programs do because it's easy, but maybe not what we want for our future. Group QI projects. So this is also pretty common where a group of residents may come up with a project and work on it together. Depending on the project and what they do, and the guidance they get, this could be a good way to go about it and maybe lessens the overall workload for each person. Some smaller number are doing individual projects. Online modules, again, goes along with didactics. And then department-wide QI projects, though the least common, I will say this is how we did it at UCSF when I was a trainee. And so I don't know how this happened, but I was somehow voluntold to lead it. And so one of my colleagues and I, we came up with a project, and then the entire department all participated in a small way, and that counted for everybody. So it was one project, the entire department got their QI project out of the way. But for 98% of our residents, ours was doing a little screen in pre-op for pre-op cognitive impairment. But for them, they had no exposure at all to any of the data collection, the discussion with stakeholders, nothing. It was just ask a patient to name a bunch of animals in pre-op. That was it. So that counted for their project. But my colleague and I did all the stuff that would be, kind of what we think of as QI work, but it counted for everyone. So I think this, again, an easy way to kind of check the box for everyone, but probably not getting the majority of the residents the learning we would hope they would get. And then we asked about access to national databases, and most programs did not have access. The programs that did, it was almost all MPOG, and the ones who had it were happy with it, but not many overall had it. So the other question was the top 3 resources that could help programs if they were given, offered, or developed. So access to registry data. People would really like that for those who don't have it. General modules or courses. So this came up again, I think, and I don't want to disparage modules and courses. I think that this can be good as a part of it, but I would like to see us not kind of have this be the sole exposure. So this can be a way to maybe get them the intro, the language, almost like a flipped classroom where you might assign these modules so that you don't have to spend classroom time going over all the language. They get that from the modules, but then in your dedicated time, you're actually working on interesting projects and talking through some ways that this can affect things in the real world. Database research training, and then OSCE training. So we are lucky we have the resources to be able to do an entire full-length practice OSCE, but not all programs have that, and so some ways to get some of that training for their residents programs would like to see. And then some additional things that came up, case-based examples. So again, this gets to this idea that can we give people some really good examples that get away from just the pre and post satisfaction surveys? And so one that came up was central line infections. You know, instead of doing a survey, did you like what we did, looking at a patient-centered outcome? Did we reduce central line infections? And did we reduce post-op nausea and vomiting? Those kind of things, again, maybe a little more work up front, but can be much more satisfying and get people excited about this kind of work. And then opportunities and sponsorship for residents to attend and participate in these kind of meetings and committees. And this is even more salient, I would say, now than ever, because many of us are at places where the budgets for travel and reimbursement for everyone, faculty and residents, are getting cut. So is there a way to provide some scholarship, some opportunity for residents to participate? For example, in a meeting like this, go to the quality and safety sessions and get excited, maybe even to have resident scholars. We have, for example, FAIR scholars, right? We have residents on the resident and medical student committee. We have resident delegates. Could we have resident QI scholars that could participate and get sponsorship? And then I just want to come back to this idea of analyzing practice. So again, I said up front, this is probably the biggest thorn in the side, not from a work standpoint, but from a how do we do it standpoint for program directors. How do we get this? And I will say that for 8 years of my first 8 years of being a program director, I beat my head against the wall trying to figure this out. And what we really did is, before the ACGMA survey, I hope no one from the ACGMA is here, but before the ACGMA survey every year, we'd kind of send out an email to the residents and we'd say, you know, when you talk about whether your patient, you know, got nauseous with your attending, that's your outcome. That's right. I mean, you can then analyze your practice based on that. I mean, it was kind of talking around it. It didn't feel real, but it was kind of all we had. And now, 2 years ago, we got access to MPOG, and we have someone who sends out to the residents every month their outcomes based on MPOG, and they can see, compared to everybody else, post-op nausea and vomiting, hypothermia, train of 4, all the things. And so this is huge and wonderful, but not everybody has this. So how can we provide this data so that residents can see this and then use it? Now, I will say that I actually don't know how much I'm supposed to say, so I'm not going to give a lot of specifics, but it'll be announced soon. But let's just say that you may be aware of the AMA grants that were just given out for precision education. One of them, again, I don't think it's been announced yet, but one of them is specifically for, and there's going to be a cohort of institutions that are going to be using MPOG data to, along with AI, to provide residents with really detailed improvement plans based on their data, and then they'll meet with human coaches to work on that and see improvement over time. And so this is going to be kind of the mecca of where this requirement should be. It's going to start with a study funded by the AMA grant, and hopefully this is something that over time we'll see all departments get access to. All right, and we'll end there, and I think we're going to do questions later, so I'll hand it off. Thanks. How do we get to the next set of slides?
I got it.
You got it.
Thanks, Joe. Nice job. Let me find myself here. Bingo. All right, guys, I'm Rick Dutton. I'm Chief Quality Officer for U.S. Anesthesia Partners. That makes me the largest contributor to NACOR and the AQI in terms of data, and also one of the largest users. We're going to talk a little about how to use data at scale, and my perspective is private practice focused. How many of you were at the Rovenstein lecture this morning and heard Dr. Ketterpal talking? Excellent. So I'll start by saying, Everything he described, coming out of MPOG, the benchmarking, the reports, all of that, we do that in USAP also. So it is equivalent, very equivalent set of data, obviously different sources, and that puts some differences in what we do. But on the other hand, we have more money, so that makes some difference too in the other direction. So I am, as I said, USAP is based in Dallas. Yeehaw. And this is us right now-ish across the country. We partner with a lot of leading health systems, Texas, Florida, Colorado, and then you can see the other states. I work every day with USAP in Maryland. This is my clinical practice. I'll show you that in a second. This is our national footprint right now, so you can see what we're looking at. We do about 2.7, 2.8 million cases a year. And we capture all of the data from every one of those cases in a single common data warehouse that we use for all sorts of different stuff, and you'll see some of that going forward. I was hired to USAP 10 years ago by John Zerwas, who you've seen some of at this meeting. He had been my boss at the AQI when he was ASA president, and as he went back into private practice for Greater Houston, they formed USAP, which process I got to watch happen from the AQI perspective, and then he recruited me sort of hard after that. And the pitch was, we want to be the best anesthesia practice in America. Come tell us how to do that. And that's been our focus. For other reasons, I recently had to benchmark this. In the 10 years I've been with USAP, we have spent about $60 million on the quality program, all in. This is where I work today, Capital Region Medical Center. If you've never heard of it, it is the former Prince George's County Hospital, rebuilt, rebranded, and it is here, 3 o'clock on the Washington, D.C. Beltway. So I go up to the very top floor of the hospital. I can just about see the top of the Washington Monument from where I am. And I am the site chief there. I work about 60 hours a week clinically right now, my second job. And I get to do a lot of trauma, high-risk OB, and other fun stuff in a underserved community. So my goal, as I said, high-quality care, best outcomes, and here are some components of that. I have spent many years thinking about what quality in anesthesia means. I think it is a multi-dimensional construct, right? You can say, yeah, we don't kill too many people, and variations of that, but there's a lot more to it than that. And if you're really running a good QI program, you want to dig into as many different channels, if you will, or dimensions of quality as you can. So the middle part of the slide, for example, business efficiency. This is very important to our hospital partners right now. They're spending $1 gazillion a year on anesthesia nationwide. Every single one of those contracts out there in the real world comes with incentives, performance metrics, and the need on both the hospital side and our side to run the operating room efficiently. So you may not think of on-time starts or same-day case cancellations as a quality metric, but believe me, in the real world, those things make a huge difference. And then I'll talk a little about reputational stuff, especially in sessions like this one, which are about data. It's hard, all of that squishy subjective stuff is hard to bring in. But there are ways to look at it, and it remains important as well. So this is our quality program, sort of on a single slide. We have a national quality committee. It's about 40-ish docs, and all of our risk and quality directors, mostly nurses, who work in each of our practices doing the ground level stuff. We collect data, as I said, every case, every day. This is some of the software we use to do this, and it ranges from our hippest places, direct abstraction from Epic, so data flowing directly into our registry straight out of Epic. And we use that obviously for revenue cycle management, billing, coding, collecting, but also all the quality elements are there as well. The big one in the middle there, Qualtrics, you may not recognize them. They're the largest survey company in the world outside of healthcare. So they do surveys for Amazon, Walmart, et cetera. When you get that, Southwest Airlines, hey, how was your flight? That's Qualtrics. They are newly into healthcare. In fact, it was announced last week they're about to buy Press Ganey, a company many of you have heard of. But they are our vendor for anesthesia-specific patient satisfaction surveys. So every patient that we touch gets a survey from us automatically within a couple days of their anesthetic. It's very quick. It's a beautiful form factor. It comes on your phone. You know, click this link to tell us about your anesthesia. And to your earlier comment about survey response, we average about 25% response from our patients. I get 600,000 or 700,000 returned patient satisfaction surveys every year. This gives us a lot to talk about, and it's one of the ways to take that subjective stuff and make it more objective. We are a federally designated patient safety organization. I'll show you the peer review structure in a minute that protects from legal discovery. And you can see some of the things we do all the way on the ground level for quality improvement. This is one of the slides I'm fondest of in our business. This was published a few years ago in this article on scaling up anesthesia quality improvement. This is what happens when a practice joins USAP. So a bunch of different dimensions of quality improvement, broadly writ, on the y-axis there. And then before and after, did this exist in this practice, is the simple question. And so a great deal of building anesthesia quality is building infrastructure. And it's those structural elements, like do you have an M&M conference? Do you capture adverse events? Do you participate in a national registry? So you have benchmarks, right? And these things happen in USAP. This is where the $60 million goes over a decade. As I mentioned, all of our groups and all of our individuals get scorecards. I can look at my phone anytime and see exactly those same reports. You saw Dr. Ketterpal show this morning, you know, my performance on 20 different quality metrics, incidence of adverse complications, my patient satisfaction as of this morning, all on the app on my phone anytime I want. Most of my clinicians don't bother looking at that more than once or twice, right? But it's in the background. Everybody has it. You can. And it's important. This is a hospital scorecard, the kind of thing we would send. This is for a whole division of USAP, North Texas, but we have this identical report for every facility we're in. We're handing that to them every quarter. Here's our performance. And it's about 5 pages of stuff. The top page, the one you're looking at, is just demographic things, what we do when we do it, who we do it to. It's, if you look at the lower left, it's often nice to be able to say to the hospital, yep, our patients are sicker than the national average, and that obviously colors other findings in the report. Typically, there'll be a page or two of our MIPS scores, so specific quality measures. These are mostly defined by Sheila's committee, Performance and Outcomes Management of the ASA, federal quality measures. We track, and we have had as many as 15 or 16 of them in play at any time. This year, we're down to about 10 because the feds keep retiring them. But we do track all of these. It's very handy for regulatory purposes. So we do our MIPS reporting. We earn incentives as a group in every state we're in. Peer review. So the other squishy bit. How many of you participate in peer review? Have done, actually looking at cases, hey, this was good care, bad care, standard was met, mistakes were made, opportunities for improvement, right? So that's a critical process to improving care, right? We are a 5.5 sigma specialty right now. It's hard to learn from big data in anesthesia because the big data all says we're really, really good. But looking at the times we're not really good, those individual isolated events, there's a huge amount of learning in that, and I couldn't emphasize more what Jed said. Get your residents, get your trainees, get all your partners engaged in the peer review process. So we do peer review everywhere we are. We have a system that sort of starts at the top here for harvesting adverse events, right? If you're the quality director, you know the first thing you want is to see as much of the iceberg as you can. So lots of mechanisms for finding out when something bad happens. Obviously, direct report is the best, but there are lots of other ways to look at it. I have institutions where we run, naloxone reports. How often did we give naloxone in the PACU? And you find things. How often did you prescribe local anesthetics for corneal abrasions? You can get back into things that way. All comes to a central office, and again, this is all protected from discovery under our structure. We count things that are counted, like dural puncture headaches or corneal abrasions, and the interesting isolated events go to the peer review committee, get discussed. And the whole purpose is, how do we mitigate this, all right? Science is ever marching on. new procedures every day, sicker patients every day, there will be adverse events. That's like a universal given in the quality business. Plus, it's a very human business and humans make mistakes. So there will always be adverse events. My goal as the quality poobah in USAP, we never want to make the same mistake twice. And that's the purpose of the peer review, is to identify that, right? And okay, how do we mitigate this? How do we keep this from happening? We work on our public perception. We're a business. We have customers. We sell to hospital systems across the country. As you can see, having a good public reputation is important. How many of you know what the Google sentiment score for your practice is? No? I do. Here it is by state in USAP. So this is Google data. Reputation. We took some steps to improve this a few years ago, and you can see the results. But you look up USAP of Colorado, you'll see, where are we? 4.5. Public sentiment about us. The bottom line, we live in the era of social media. People are going to talk about you and your group. Nothing is secret. All right, actively managing that, looking at it, and knowing what's being said about you is very useful for practices. Academic engagement. So we've started 4 residencies in the last 6 years. We train across the country, about 30 residents a year of our own in 4 different programs now. We teach hundreds and hundreds of residents, students, CRNAs, CAAs who rotate with us different places. I have in my hospital in DC, we have SRNAs from both Hopkins and Maryland. We get residents from the military programs in DC. So everybody is teaching, everybody's training. Obviously, this is good for recruiting and retaining, but it keeps us closely connected to what's going on in the academic world, how to use data, and research. Lots of opportunities with both USAP and NACOR data. These are both available to people, and to Jed's point, this is something program directors probably need to pick up on. But anybody who asks me can get access to blinded USAP data. We're working on several projects right now with residents and fellows across the country, not ours necessarily, but those who have found us through some connection or other and are doing it. So we're just, later this afternoon, we'll present data on an attrition project. So we've had 10,000 clinicians go through USAP in the last decade. How long did they stay? Where did they come from? Why did they leave? What are the predictors of retaining anesthesia faculty? That was the fundamental question there. Student in UC Irvine has taken that data and is about to present a poster on it this afternoon. The paper's underway. Projects like that go all the time. I have about half a dozen of them spinning at any moment. Our patient satisfaction data is unique. Scott's in the back of the room. Scott's program director in Houston Methodist, but also one of the leaders in the Liver Transplant Society. We presented data there on Friday. USAP covers 15% of all the liver transplants in the country right now. Something like we presented data on 1,500 liver transplants from our registry. Again, available to people who want to partner with us to use it. And we have done some prospective projects as well. Some of the folks we're working with right now. Did a project last year with the University of Pennsylvania, got published last year, how to mitigate benzodiazepine use in older patients, where it wasn't just observational data. We actually built in a bunch of quality improvement exercises, like how do we educate people, how do we encourage providers not to give old patients midazolam. Right, that was the core of the project. It's very simple. And we did it by showing them data on how often they did it compared to their peers, so you're better, you're worse. We did it by educating patients. Hey, ask your doctor about benzodiazepines. The N in that paper was 615,000 patients over 65 years in 1 year, I think 2022 to 2023. And we lowered the rate of, call it gratuitous benzodiazepine use, from about 30% to about 15, 17% across our business. That was kind of a big project. That's the nationwide version of this, but you can run this all the way down to the level of your local hospital if you have the data. I will also mention NACOR. As I said, we're the largest contributors. We send everything we do to NACOR. We're, I don't know, some fraction of what's in NACOR, just went over 110 million cases, I think, for the past decade. And there's a lot there. It is available to anybody who asks nicely. There's a data use committee. You can ping on the website and see how to get access to large or small hunks of that data. We are happy to share it. And please feel free to do it and point your residents in our direction as well. The only requirement for access to NACOR data is that you be contributing data to NACOR. So it's pretty much exactly what Sachin said about MPOG this morning. But it's easy to do to participate in NACOR, and it's a nice opportunity for your academic program. We also just this year started an official AQI Research Fellowship program. Zach, wave Zach, is our first research fellow. He's a senior resident. He'll spend a month, he'll spend the whole year, but he'll spend a month officially doing research with AQI and NACOR data. There's other bits and pieces to that. Errors you heard mentioned on the Closed Claims Project are part of AQI as well. So if you're interested in something that's anecdotal, case report, looking at very specific adverse events, those are sources where you can do that as well. So also available. I think that's about where I am. Final thing, participate. This is something we need to encourage all the way down to the residency level, right? ASA has a huge number of resources. It's not just networking and people and politics. It is a lot of data. There is a lot of access to both expertise and the channels you need to send out surveys, to meet people, to find, one thing you can do in NACOR is find every hospital in the country that's doing knee replacements, for example, or C-sections, or pick your topic of interest. So I encourage everybody to get involved, be involved, all right, and encourage your practice and your partners to do the same. With that, I think I'll wrap up. We'll get questions at the end. Thank you all very much. And just click on that, and now this should work.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you all. Note to self, next time go before Rick, not after him. He does amazing stuff. He's truly the leader in the field in quality and stuff. So mine is a little bit of a slightly different bent here. I'm just the disclosures up to date. I'm going to talk a little bit about faculty improvement, the data engagement, which I think is really important, and perhaps a little bit on the future. When I introduce a little bit, I'm a department chair. I've been a department chair for about a year. I'm in Dartmouth. It's about 50 faculty, about 30, 40 residents and fellows. We cover one main hospital and then a bunch of smaller system hospitals. But just to put in the perspective, this is kind of my perspective from being a chair for about a year. I came from Beth Israel in Boston, huge system, bigger hospital, bigger department, different challenges. So this is going to be a little bit my perspective. But I just wanted to start with saying I think you're all here because we all think quality improvement matters. And I think we always need to keep coming back to this because I think it really matters. But I'm not convinced everybody else that's not in this room always feels as strongly about quality and quality improvement. And that's something that I think is so important that we remember this, from the 2000s with the to Air is Human and then the follow-up of Crossing the Chasm. We really pivoted our field in medicine to really look at what are we doing well and what aren't we doing well and how do we continue with that. Here's my constant conundrum is, what's the value proposition to faculty? Why should they care beyond compliance? The residents have to graduate, actually. The faculty have to participate and do some things, but actually, really, I want them giving great care, clinical care in the operating rooms. I want them taking care of patients, but how do I engage them to do something more? So I think that's what that's what we're all here for, I hope. So beyond compliance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, really my perspectives on how I think that we can engage our faculty. And maybe I'll do a follow-up and give me 2 years and see how we're doing in our department. I think the clinical benefits actually, from my perspective, I have an incredibly strong clinical department. I think they really care about their outcomes. We take a lot of pride in our work. So I do think the clinical benefits of doing quality work is something that faculty can really get hold of. Improved outcomes, your better reputation, not only your department, but you're the one in the department that does X, Y, and Z that's just superb. Less complications, you're the go-to person, less stress. Opportunities to come to a meeting like this and then come back and institute it at our program or at our hospital, at your hospital. I think that's a real value proposition for why faculty should look at quality improvement and look at change. And I think feedback also, helps learning. It's sort of, if you can get some feedback from some data, then you can make some changes. And, we don't always change in the right way. Sometimes it is slower in PACU. Sometimes it is faster in PACU for recovery when we introduce different practices. This is just something from the literature. I actually have tons from my group, but I didn't want to make it just all their thing. I'd prefer them to be presenting it, let's put it that way. So I have some, this is, I think, just an example of what we need to make sure faculty have in their back pocket. It was mentioned by both the training in quality. Do you know how to set up a program? I'm sure they did it in their residencies, but are they going to remember it 2 or 3 years out after when they're a junior faculty member? So just knowing, do people have access to appropriate help and leadership to set up plan, do, study, act type cycles? This is one group published that did a nice job looking at train of 4 monitoring and how you can get people to improve or able to use MPOG, set up the study, and then they published this and they showed that train of 4 monitoring improved over time. That's great. I'm sure that was a very satisfying project. I mean, the outcome really would probably be aspiration or PACU or some physiological event. But on the other hand, this is a nice example of a very satisfying project to do. And then this is one that we did locally before I got there, did locally. We introduced Sugamadex. It's very expensive. Pharmacy wasn't thrilled. So they, to our department, went back and then looked at, let's look at different rates of aspiration and pulmonary complications in the PACU. So I think this was a great example of some engaged clinical faculty that wanted to use Sugamadex, because once you start using it, it is pretty cool that you can just wake people, reverse that quickly. But we took it and used data, and then I think data always makes the argument better. So I think this is a really good example of faculty care. I'm going to be in the OR with the patient. This matters to me. I don't want pharmacy to take it away. Let's look at a QA project and really look at it. So that's sort of some of the clinical sort of benefits. The professional development part, I think this is really important. And it's not just about your requirements. It's really about developing, as Ben hinted at, it's also your communication and leadership skills. How do you take that incident or that what happened in the operating room and translate it into a real quality improvement project and not a fight between nurses and anesthesiologists, as making it a positive opportunity to make a difference. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for leadership skills. I think we really need to dive back in after we get out of our residencies, but really more on quality methodology, I think, is really important, that we provide easy avenues to faculty to be able to access this. But it's challenging. At Dartmouth, we actually have we have a value institute. We've been heavily into quality for many, many years. There's an enormous amount of courses and green belts and yellow belts and all sorts of things that you can take. You got to have time, though. And it can't be at noon. That's what I get from my faculty all the time, that every good lecture is at noon, and we're in the OR. So, I think it's this sort of thing of we've got to teach people how to do good quality research. We've got to be able to support our faculty to do that, to make it rewarding, so you're not just spinning your wheels and doing sort of bad data in, bad data out, and everyone's frustrated. I'm an academic chair. I want scholarly output. I consider scholarly output just about anything. It can be presenting at a meeting here. It can be writing something up for the monitor. It can be a true published article in a peer-reviewed journal. That's great. But there's a lot of ways to show scholarly output in your own academic department. It can be interdepartmental conferences or grand rounds. So I think that that's important to, and I always hope with faculty that then maybe they get a little hooked, because there is kind of something fun about taking your project and presenting it and showing it. You know, I'm incredibly optimistic, by the way. So I'm actually hopeful. And then there is academic and professional advancement. You've got to do something. If you want to get promoted, you really do have to do something. You can be a great clinician, a great teacher. On an academic scholarly track, you're going to have to publish or write or talk or do something. So I think that quality is a much more practical way for our mostly clinician educators to be able to take a project and potentially publish it. And like I said, skill development, doing some of these lean projects or different types of qualifications. You know, it's great to get a master's and stuff. Not all of us can afford it or have the time or luxury to do that. But that's obviously, to me, the icing on the cake. But I never did that. I never had the opportunity or the time to really feel comfortable stepping away from, you know, looking at my husband as like the college education type stuff. It's, you know, life's expensive. So this was just an example of something that our department did a couple of years ago that I think is a really nice one of how our clinicians came together to do data. We had a problem with nights. Everyone has a problem with nights. Covering nights. We are a trauma center. You know, there's not much around us, so our code strokes are all night. We're getting, not as big as many of yours, but for our size, we're getting a lot of really sick patients all the time. So we did basically a value proposition to the hospital as to, we put a nocturnist in. These folks work 7 nights in a row. They work it out. They're kind of a team. They get paid probably marginally a little bit more than ordinary faculty, but they also have different perks. But it costs the institution more. So we went to them and we've tracked the data on, yep, we do more cases at night now. That is good because we start Monday morning over full with a 98% full schedule. So we need to do cases nights and weekends. There's nowhere on the OR schedule to put these. So I think this has been a really great example of something the faculty felt very strongly about, really voted as a group to do this. This is a real positive. And you know, one of the first things they say when I get there is don't wreck the nocturnist program. So it's a really good program, but it's a really good example of, I think, of empowering us using data, real world data, quality improvement, and then making a change. And it's a better business case, obviously, to the hospital. And then, of course, there's, you know, the data to publication pipeline. You know, ideally, you identify an issue. We have a quality council review. We get some faculty involved, hopefully some mentorship, collect the data. We have a lot of data. I'll talk about that in a moment. We have a lot of analytics support, actually, and we have a statistician. I got here a year ago, and I was like, wow, this is magical. And then present, hopefully, and go ahead and publish. This is really aspirational, I think, to have all your QI projects published, but I do think that that's the holy grail. That's why we're at these academic departments on some level, is to disseminate our knowledge, and that's, I feel strongly about this. My department may not feel so strongly, but they're getting the message that I feel strongly, so that's good. Then the value proposition to the faculty, and I think this is the hardest part. You know, your department, your partners, wherever you USAP or wherever you're working, that is your family. We're spending a lot of time together. The happiness of your group is going to impact your happiness. The satisfaction is going to impact your happiness. So I think it's engagement and meaningful peer-to-peer collaborations, not finger pointing, but what can we do together? This, you know, these last 3 cases that we did with a new surgeon and whatever didn't work out so well. What can we do from an anesthesia perspective? Ironically, we just took over a and created more of an endo center in our hospital with all propofol. You know what? We weren't that fast at waking people up because we're used to doing ASA 3 and 4s in the OR that are going to pack you. It's a different value. So that was a real opportunity to, hey, we can't point fingers here, but we need to get these people moving because there's no space, and it's a different type of anesthetic, a different style. So I think that meaningful collaboration and then mentorship, and I really think that it's, you know, you can, when I was, I did some work in a community hospital, a lot of solo cases. It's great, it's satisfying, but you can get into a sort of check mentality. I get in, I push, I go, I wake up, I go. And you know, there's sometimes I think I crave maybe there's a little more to it than that. And I think quality is the way to go, finding that problem. We have, and a recognition for contributions. We do have a small amount of contribution that is, it's a small amount of a bonus that's given based on some of your quality metrics. We have MPOG, I'll show you. And reduced burnout, I think that's, I think it does help reduce burnout if you're not just grinding away in the OR, if you're doing something a little more imaginative. Is data the answer? I really went to Dartmouth thinking, okay, they've got everything. We have MPOG. I was so excited about the MPOG stuff. We had MPOG, we have NISQIP, we have STS. We're going to become an ACR site with AQI and NACOR. So we just have a lot of data. It's part of the answer, but to be honest, it's not all of the answer. This is MPOG. We've heard a lot about MPOG at this meeting. There's a ton of metrics available. We choose certain ones, and our faculty, like Rick's and others, get all the data on a regular. You get your individual provider performances. And at first I thought, oh, this is really cool. It's really cool, but it's another email or whatever in your box. You've got to make this live. Data has to be live. It's got to be meaningful to us. So it's fantastic when you're going back to do a project. I'm not always convinced on how much it's impacting people's daily scores. And also, I mean, I hate to say it, we are looking at things that are pretty easy so that people are scoring very high, which is great. But I think that this is work to be done here to engage people. And then this is for leadership, so we can look across the department level, and that's great to have that. I did want to comment too about the AQI as well, because we talk a lot about MPOG. AQI also has a lot of stuff that you can go, and the ASA website has a lot of stuff. But NACOR, the closed claims stuff that I think is really I suppose, advertised from AQI. If you are interested in stuff, you can contact them, maybe go back and look at closed malpractice cases. I think it's fascinating. So that's one thing. And the AIRS, the incident reporting system. We did create at our place, my quality director is extremely, she's fantastic. She came up with, we have DARES at our place, we have Dartmouth anesthesia. But it's kind of nice, it's on Epic, you can put things in, and it's been great for things like machine malfunction. It seems trivial, but how often are you in OR 15, you go through, the thing doesn't break, it's not there, but then you're not there for 2 more weeks and you come back and it's still not doing it quite right. So we've had a lot of success of just doing really local quality improvement on annoying things that are happening that are just a moment in time. They're not a true incident. They don't need to go the whole incident reporting system thing. So we go those and then they get looked at again, and they'll be elevated if need be. And then AQI, do you want to make a pitch for AQI? There, we're joining with, Epic is joining. AQI is going to really refresh itself, NACOR 2.0, and we're going to create we are creating a new anesthesia community registry, which will take data from Epic and ultimately other EHRs as well, and bring it into AQI. So instead of it being Epic data that you're getting, it will actually be anesthesia data that you're getting. It's anesthesia, AQI, ASA working for us as clinicians for our data. And I think that will be very powerful, and I'm excited about that. So finally, building faculty engagement. I think I've talked a little bit about this. I think it's encouraging the asking why, really, really making it easy for faculty to say, this didn't work, can I work on it? We do provide support for that. But what makes it hard? Production pressure is real. People are tired at the end of the day. They've got families, they've got things to do. It's a long day. It's hard to get people engaged. Not everybody knows how to do it. Data can require more IT support, which I think as a chair you really have to fight for this sort of stuff. Priorities, inertia, we've always done this, and does it always make a difference? But I think that's where data counts. I do want to comment on our future. We've heard of 2 great opportunities. Apparently Zach's over there. I'm really excited about this. This is the AQI research rotation. I think this is just will be great for our specialty, and just to, really encourage people other than just taking a master's in quality at some hospital that doesn't know anything about, or school that doesn't know anything about anesthesia. This will be very valuable. And then there's also the MPOG Outcomes Research Fellowship. I'll definitely give a talk if I get anyone on any of these. Of course, there's a lot of educational opportunities at AQI as well. There's Advance in January, which will have a lot more on quality as well that I'm sure all of us will be at. But thank you very much, and I think now we're up for questions. Oops. I shouldn't have.
All right, you've heard a lot of things about what people are doing, residency, large national practices, academic practices. Question?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ryan Pong. I'm from Virginia Mason in Seattle. Thank you for such a wonderful and thoughtful lectures. And I really appreciate the way you lined up the residency part of this and what leads into the professional practice elements of this. So the question I have is for Dr. Dutton and Sheila. It's really taking the work that Jed has been working on and with all the program directors across the country, are you starting to see the effects of the training that has been in place for a really long time? The ACGME, the ABA, they're trying to improve patient outcome through accreditation and examination. Are we starting to see that in the faculty and the staff that you're hiring? And then before you answer that, the one ask for all of you, because I think you have access to program directors in each of your areas, and Jed, you as well, is that the common program requirements are undergoing a massive revision right now at the ACGME. So depending on what you say, please take some of that learning and bring it back to the ACGME as they're starting to think about creating new requirements for all future trainees.
Great point. What do y'all think?
Yes. So anesthesia is getting steadily safer. We solve problems every day. You can see it in a macro sense. It can be hard to miss sometimes as the local program director. And one of the things I battle with is the depression that sets in when you realize that it's an infinite job, right? And I have a slide for this somewhere that's a Chuck E. Cheese whack-a-mole game, right? You're the quality improvement director. There are always problems. There is always another problem. We can always do better, all right? So it's easy to get bogged down in just the overwhelming nature of the job, the task. It's infinite, right? What I do and what I encourage you all to do is once a year or so, flip the script and say, all right, here's everything we did last year. Here are all the projects we completed. Here are all the things we improved. And that can be, we got TXA stuck in the OB Pyxis, right? That was a project. We needed to do that. Somebody made that happen. All the way up to big, departmental-wide things. We launched an ERAS protocol for colorectal surgery or whatever. List those all out. That makes a nice 10 minutes at your M&M. And then present a case rather than an adverse event. Present a great save. You have more of those, actually, when you stop to look for them. And every 6 months or so, I try and do this in my local quality program. We have the positive day that really helps people understand how much progress we're making. And you roll that up nationally, you get to where you are, where you can show stuff to the ACGME. This is what we're accomplishing.
I think there's definitely way more awareness of what quality improvement is than there was. And I think there's also more engagement, and you can use data and you can do different things. Not everyone is going to be a black belt or a green belt or anything, and it's just not going to float their boat, as it were. But I do think that there is more awareness of that, and I think we're in the ASA, for example. I think we're opening up channels so people can identify with like groups. There are going to be some people that are doing hardcore clinical trials, but now I think there's a lot more opportunity now for people that do want to do more quality improvement to find their friends and family and do it with them. So I do think, I'm sure Jed's program is, we do the group system-based practices, and it gets a lot of excitement. There's a prize at the end of the year for what residents group. Can't remember how they fit the groups, but everyone's in the group, and it's kind of a prize at the end of the year of who gets the best quality improvement prize after they present their data. It's a kind of a vote. So I think that engages, and that engages faculty too, because everyone has a faculty mentor. So, I think that is helpful, because it's a bit like Rick says, it's celebrating things, not just always, it's interesting. We've had feedback on our quality conferences of like, I can't look at MPOG one more time. So that's the flip side. I know I'm not meant to say that probably, but faculty get tired of just endless MPOG data. So I do think that it's got to be celebratory, it's got to be fun. But I'm hoping our residents are taking it forward, and our faculty certainly are taking our residents.
I'll just add quickly, I think one of the disservices we do is that we make, for the most part, in most places, we make residents do this on their own time, right? There's no protected time for it. And I think that's, faculty are the same way, right? If you said, I need you to go get an R01, but you're going to work 5 days a week and take a full call load, while you're doing it. There are some, but very few. who could or would be excited about that. And so I think that what I would like to see from the ACGME in general is some structure around some protected time for residents, for QI, for research, for the things that they are required to do, rather than it being essentially an unfunded mandate, right? You have to do this stuff, but you get no time for it. And that, I think, is a recipe for residents being resentful of it.
Yeah.
Hi, Daniel Perrin from Brazil. I would like to know from you, when you analyze the data, you receive a lot of information. Do you have any tools to take care of bad performances? How do you take care of the staff or the residents that are not performing well? How can we take care of them and improve their performance?
So the first thing, if you are looking at all the data, you very quickly realize that system issues are more important than the occasional bad apple. You have them. Truly bad anesthesia clinicians tend to distinguish themselves in multiple ways pretty quickly, and often not hard to identify that way. For routine performance and continuous performance improvement, what we're trying for, the single best mechanism is just feedback. And you do have to be creative about that because, as I said, my folks can all look at their scores and nobody does, right? Because you look at it once, oh, that's nice, and you forget the login, you never bother going there again. So you have to be somewhat creative in how you put that in front of people. Our patient satisfaction data is a good example. So we measure it. We can also show that we have steadily improved it, and we've done that through a number of different mechanisms. So occasional didactic training, hey, here's how to talk to the patient pre-op, rattle the curtain, tell them you're respecting their privacy, sit down, visit them in the PACU when they're awake. There's some very tangible tips, and we present that stuff out. In theory, they can all look at their scores. They're not. Once a quarter, we push that at them, so they get an email that's just instant pop-up graphic, here's you, here's everybody else, here's how you're doing. That's followed on that one. That's a bright spot one, because we then give them half a dozen patient comments from their patients, and they don't know who or what, it's come through the system, that are positive, right? Thank you so much, you did this was great. And the opposite side of the coin, if somebody gives one of our clinicians a very low score, which is fortunately rare, but happens, and writes a comment, that will come anonymously into their mailbox. And it's not weaponized, it's a very private transaction. They know that only they are seeing this. But, if it says, I was so offended Dr. Dutton didn't talk to my family during the pre-op interview, that comes into my mailbox, I see it off, you have the usual reaction to that kind of negative feedback, but it's just me, and that's very easy to fix, right? And that we have shown our bottom 10% of patient satisfaction performers are different every year. And that's what I want. It's a tank tread. They're getting the feedback, they're improving, and we roll up every year. That's how we want it to work.
All right, well, our time is up. I'm sure the speakers could stay for a few minutes if anyone has any other questions, but thank you for coming and participating, and we appreciate your feedback when you fill out your evaluations. Have a good day.